Talk about masculinity for me. What does that mean when you hear that word?
I mean, the imagery that comes to mind first is just like being a man. You know, how you talk, how you walk, how you present yourself, um, how you protect, how you defend, how you serve, how you lead. These are the first things that come to mind for me.
I mean, like I said, man, I'm a Southerner, so the first thing I think of when you say like masculine, when you ask me what masculinity is like, I'm sitting with my back, to the wall. I'm walking on the outside on the sidewalk. All of these things. My refined view on masculinity is whatever a man does, but I think that that's a comfortable, privileged understanding of it as well. Uh, you greet people, you look people in the eye, you make sure your word is solid enough to stand on, and you show up and you do your work. But
Coming from the Dominican Republic, a lot of like masculinity comes from like older men, right? Like how you're supposed to act when it comes to your posture, right? A lot of Dominican men are against like gay, like being queer, right? Um, so that was tough growing up, right? Because I feel like growing up, I didn't necessarily know that it was wrong, right? Because that's what I was taught, I led to believe in.
Knowing when and how to assert yourself, knowing how to be empathetic in certain situations, knowing how to show up for others, knowing how to lead, knowing how to educate and share knowledge. You know what I mean? Masculinity, positive masculinity is knowing how and when to use your ego.
For me, masculinity is a facade. It doesn't really exist. It's a social construct. And so, no, it doesn't really matter to me at this point. I can't say it never did. It's certainly, again, with my ego, they kind of went hand in hand. But at this point, masculinity is whatever you define it as, right? Like you have people with all types of different intersections that call themselves masculine. And so you can't really, in my opinion, say masculinity is one thing. When I think of masculinity, though, I think of, for myself, vulnerability, truth, honesty, integrity, the things that matter to me as a man when I define myself.
I've been fighting for masculinity my entire life. I mean, when you grow up black and gay, everything you do is a question of how much of a man are you? I have to walk out the door and figure out, am I dressed man enough today? Do I sound man enough? Is my voice deep enough today to be cool in these spaces where I don't know people are gonna see me and say like, that's a whole person and that man is still a man because of who he chooses to love.
I'm a first generation Jamaican American, and in my culture, if you know anything about Jamaicans, man, they're hyper masculine. I mean, you think about Haitian men and Jamaican men, they're top two, and they really hold dear to that standard. So where it came to expressing myself emotionally, there was never any of that, and kind of being masculine and emoting kind of made you feel like less than. And especially in Jamaican culture, like women are quick to tell you like you need to shut up, be a man, man up, or they hit you in the stomach and all that. Be a man. And as a child, you internalize that like, okay, so crying isn't manly. The only manly form of expression is anger. Yeah, man. So it's been hard to kind of counteract those thought processes. Because I mean, that schema is embedded in me over time.
Learning how and when to be vulnerable is important. And I think that's tough I think that was tough for my father because he lost his father at 3. You know what I mean? So he grew up in New Orleans. And I feel like, the environment that he grew up in, he had to assert himself from a young age. And being vulnerable was a sign of weakness, you know what I'm saying, in the neighborhoods that he grew up in. And I feel like it was a little different in the neighborhoods and situations that I grew up in where there was a little bit more diversity and opportunity in the spaces that I could be vulnerable and the spaces that I couldn't. And I felt like I'm more keen to when I can be and when I cannot be. You know what I mean? And I think that's just important. You know what I mean? Discernment, using discernment with your masculinity is important.
But yeah, I guess like after moving from the DR and like seeing every type of like different type of personalities, people out here, right? Definitely gave me an open mind of like what it is to be yourself.
So masculinity in my life right now is being more fluid in my approaches, being more thoughtful, leading with care, fathering with empathy. That's what masculinity means for me.
I think that as a kid, I leaned heavily into what I thought a black man was supposed to be, doing street shit, being a knucklehead. And then as I evolved and changed and became an educator, I realized that I had to redefine what it meant, because I was now a role model and a leader for not only my family, but the students that I work with and the people that were around me. And so, it's ever changing and evolving. So it's hard to like nail that down. It could be different tomorrow. I aspire to be a father. And when that happens, it'll change and evolve again.
There was always this question of me trying to be this person I was supposed to be, that I was raised to be, that everybody told me I was supposed to be. Be a man, be a man, be a man. Don't cry, stand up, be a man. But knowing the whole time that like my version of this does not fit what everybody else is doing and how everyone's told me this is supposed to be. And so there was this sort of expectation you wake up with every day of like, okay, here's what the list is of what I was supposed to be. I'm very clear I don't add up here, 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 and here. I can maybe figure it out here, here, and here. I'm absolutely faking it here. And as I've grown, I think part of my work has been figuring out like, one, all these things are made up. So what does it mean for me to just choose my version of it? And how do I live that out in a way that feels authentic to me, which is consistently a journey, trying things, pushing the envelope and figuring out what's enough, what's too much. But again, also for the service of people that I love. There's students of mine who I remember came to me and were like, gee, like you being you gave me the confidence to be me. And so I'm like, how can I never not walk in this person I am every day when I know that there are people who are seeing that and are like, yeah, I can be me because that's possible now. And I know that I got to do that because I saw people before me who chose to lean into all the weird quirks and the I'm not quite like everybody else, but that's okay-ness of it all. So
it was important to explain to them that like you're carrying what people tell you that you are and what people tell you these things are. And like in real life, you got to define it for yourself. I'm gonna always circle back to that like that's super individualized. And so, whenever I had one-off conversations with kids that I thought were maybe having some issues, just asking a lot of why and probing questions, really trying to get to the root of like, why do you feel that way? And do you feel that way authentically and genuinely, or has somebody programmed you to think those things? A lot of times they were programmed to think that way. And so you got to kind of dismantle that stuff.
Vulnerability on a personal level didn't really come into my life until I moved until like after college. But I started like questioning all of these things through philosophy. Like what does happiness mean? Like how do people find it in their life? Like why are the people that are making all this money killing themselves? Why are these people that are living below poverty still just going time and time again? What are these things? And so I started making those types of questions. But
again, we still uphold this thought process that you got to man up through everything, and that's not possible. Man up leads to suicide, man up leads to incarceration, man up leads to murder, and all of these other things that, again, we kind of perpetuate out there as a truth, but it's really a myth. And so, I check in with the homies, I hug them, I tell them I love them with no hesitation because, it's important. And it's funny, when I first started doing it, there was a hesitancy to return it because like I'll tell a homie I love him and it's like what you mean by that? And I love you, bro. And now at this point, my wife there's no hesitation. They return it. I give it returns reciprocated.
As a black man, especially how I was raised, and the way a lot of my friends are raised, because we hail from similar upbringings and backgrounds, there's a lot of implied care.
It's only the first time that it's awkward, right? And then somebody like lets you know, then you know that you're at least this close with a person, right? It's like the first time you talk about when you share something pretty heavy, and you're like, oh, okay, I can at least trust this person with this much pressure. I don't want to always come to them, but I know I can talk to them, right? So, of course it's awkward, like, but,
It depends on the trauma of the dude I was talking to, realistically. Depends on how much stuff they got to impact. It depends on how much they were holding on to their ego and to all of those things, and like the societal construct again of like what you're supposed to say to another man. The hugging part was probably harder than the love, right? Because like some men don't want to be touched. Some of the homies been incarcerated, so like you can't just touch them out the blue. So I think again it just depends on how far that person is down their pathway towards liberating themselves. But I think the hugging was more difficult than the love, but twice, about a second or third time. And I'm gonna stay on the line like I love you. It's quiet, it's crazy. You heard me, and then eventually reciprocated. But it's genuine too, because I'm not just telling you just because I'm supposed to say it. Like I love you because I'm checking in on you. I'm asking you how your kids are, your family. You could come to me with issues, and so it took a while. It took a while for me to take ownership of that process, but at this point, I understand how important it is.
It's been interesting. I've not had very many conflicts in my friend groups over time. I think it's a combination of a lot of my people are generally easygoing, and so there's just not much that they're interested in fighting about. They're more so just like, issue? What do we need to do to move so that the issue's not an issue?
I don't know. In my relationships, like everything reaches a point where the scales tip. So you might have a minor conflict, which I guess if you put your adult empathetic hat on, you could have tackled the conflict in that moment. But sometimes as a man, you're like, okay, well, maybe I'm tripping, or maybe this doesn't need to be talked about, or you don't really want to expose how you feel about whatever it was. But when those things repeat, it reaches a point where you don't explode, but you're like, nah, dog, enough is enough. So conflicts like that, a lot of the times they get heated, and an argument that feels like it was about one thing was probably about something else.
Your friend groups and being able to be vulnerable and have conversations is powerful, because it could be a simple misunderstanding that could go 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, and now you lost somebody who was probably like one of your day ones, you know what I'm saying? And that's significant for sure.
But I'm choosing to lean into like, no. This is a part of relationships. That's natural, that we have to figure out these pieces. And the route to a better and deeper and more fulfilling relationship is through these points where we don't understand one another yet and don't know these things, and choose to lean in and ask and learn and be open to receiving what that is and saying, yep, that totality, I'm invested in that. I'm invested in you. And that's why I'm still here.
I know me, it's easier to be vulnerable with those that are being vulnerable with you.
You could see guys, and you knew people who were just like literally like, I've got your whole self. I've got your heart. I've got your back. Has been really transformative in these last couple of years as I've tried to figure out this new space that I'm coming into as a person, as a man, as a real adult in some cases.
Black men care. We just don't talk about it.